Pursuit Of Podcast, a purely guest-centric show focusing on people and organizations that advance positive change. Positivity can be anywhere, and in a time of vast discord, the pursuit of is finding those who champion its causes loudest. Join us as we sit and learn about the pursuits of local leaders in their community. Let's go.
Hello, good people, and welcome to the Pursuit Of Podcast, where it's truly not us, it's you. I'm Ryan Buck, Artist Development, New Leonard Media. With me is the boss, Mark Wilson, President, New Leonard Media. How's it going today?
It's going great. Ryan, I like your shirt. I heard you got a new gig.
I did get a new gig. That's enough of talking about us. Today, our guest is Gary Howe, Advocacy and Communications Director with Norte. How are you?
I'm fine. What's with the shirt, though? Don't go that fast.
We talked about ourselves enough. This is about our guests. That was more than enough answer, right? Would you agree?
Well, it is a very fine shirt, and congratulations on your new job.
You know what's hilarious? I might not edit that out, and I might just mention that Ryan explains the bit to every guest before, and this one time we didn't.
Yeah, so we intentionally kind of cut each other off.
Look on Gary's face was priceless. Like, whoa,
it's a bit.
Is he going to do that to me?
Oh, I understood. I was just bringing it back.
All right. So I'll start over here. Our guest today is Gary Howe, Advocacy and Communications Director with Norte. How are you, sir? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's our
happy
pleasure
to be here. This is a great little setup you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully you're comfortable. Looking at what you do, so the listeners have a framework, what does your role with Norte encompass? And was this position there since the beginning, or did it kind of form organically?
Oh, no. Norte has grown gangbusters since 2015, starting with just Ty, the co-founder, and Laura Otwell was there at the beginning as well, and then a slew of volunteers. Now we're in the 7th year, and we're looking at, I think we have about 8 core staff, and then we have literally 70 to 80 coaches, those seasonal employees, so some who check in for a little bit. So anyway, just to emphasize the growth, and my role, I was originally hired part-time as Advocacy Director to help just kind of with those relationships with our municipal partners, our school partners, as well as the neighborhood citizen advocates, as I call them, just to help kind of provide some direction to that, put together tools for folks to use, and just to assist wherever we can. Since then, that was in 2019 when I was hired on, I believe. First thing I was hired on to was to teach an Advocacy Academy, which is a 6-week course that had been developed prior to me coming on. I came on in the 2nd year of that, and that happens in February. And that is a direct, 6-week course about, what does it take to engage and represent at your local level, and what are some best practices, what are tools you need. So anyway, that's what I was kind of came on to, and just last December 2020, was when I came on as full-time as adding the communications role.
Excellent. So what drew you to Norte?
I've been a walk and roll advocate for many years. So, I actually, 2009 is when I started to kind of speak up a little bit more and just noted hey, there's investments that need to be made. And for instance, if we're going to tear up a street and totally reconstruct it, which was happening in 2010, a section of 8th Street by Family Fair was going to be ripped up, closed down for a whole summer and reconstructed. And the original plan was to put it back in the exact way it was. So that raised, my interest because I was like, whoa, that's a missed opportunity. And you're creating a liability for the next generation.
Right.
So if we're going to reconstruct it, let's redesign it and really make it more accessible for everybody. And not just everybody, for me as a resident, for my neighbors as residents, when we want to have choices. We want to walk, we want to bike, we want to take the bus, and we drive. So make it for everything.
Yeah.
And whenever you reconstruct a road, that's a generation lasting investment.
Yeah.
If not 2 generations, because usually that next reconstruction isn't a full reconstruction, it's just a fix-up. So
it's an interesting way of putting it. I don't think people look at it. They just look at the immediate impact on them right now and the inconvenience and don't see the eyes on the prize for the next generation.
And the key is it's not about you.
Yeah.
And that's really, when I look at advocacy, it's great if you have an issue that is close to you and you want something for yourself, but the public space is seldom the place where you're going to get quick results. Mark and I have worked together on a few things.
Yeah.
And I get criticized a lot because people will bring me in and they'll want, like, we need to do something. I was like, okay, yeah, it's going to be 18 months. And I'm like making it up. That's like a guesstimation sometimes, but in actuality,
based on experience.
But based on experience, like, yeah, it's going to be 18 months if everything goes well. And
Yeah.
it usually takes a little bit longer. And if you're lucky, it took 14 months.
Right.
Okay, great.
Sometimes 5 years.
And sometimes 5 years, or in the case of 8th Street, that was 10 years. But because there's public space is just, there's so many interests, right? And like a city making investments in hard infrastructure, it's not like they just think of it next, 1 year and the next year they're doing it.
Yeah.
They're 6 years, 10 years out. And if a really good engineering and planning department are working together, they might be thinking 15 years out. It might not be on paper yet. They might not be talking about it yet. But in the back of their mind, they're like, oh, if we do this street, then that'll lead to this and that'll lead to that. And then you got to assume there's going to be some hiccups along the way. Right. And, so you have to take that long.
And you got 3 months each year to do it.
Yeah, and then up here, it's exactly. Yeah. No, but really, it's just about helping people understand that. It's great. We need more walk and roll folks out there who are advocating for change and recognize it's like planting a tree. You're doing it for the next generation and the next generation after that.
When you're in, polite conversation at a soiree or something and you say, I work with Norte, and they don't know what that is.
Yeah,
What's your elevator pitch? What do you say to them?
Well, for Norte, we're youth-focused, happy, healthy, strong communities. We want to just encourage everybody to get out there and stay active out there in the public space. And whether that's, just going for a nightly walk or maybe walking to school or walking to work in the morning, which is very accessible for people.
Yeah.
Or getting out on a bike, take that next step, or getting out and, we have a youth mountain bike team and we get them out there and get them pushing off on the trails. And some of those develop into really hardcore, racers.
Yeah.
So that's the racers aren't our focus, but we're happy to help them get there as well.
Sure. From the website, the mission, Norte builds stronger, better connected, and more bike-friendly communities by empowering the young and the young at heart. Who's the young at heart? Can that be anybody?
That could be anybody.
That's you, Ryan.
That's you and I. That's Mark. It's our grandparents, if they're still around. It's like, it's, when you look at communities, it's 8 and 80. Can we design a community where an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old can feel comfortable and encouraged to get out there and be active, right? Yeah. Get out there to know their neighbors and get out there and visit the parks and stay active.
Yeah.
Generally.
And also from the website, and I really like how you spell out what you do best. So it's active life for kids, happy, healthy, strong community, grassroots advocacy, and youth leadership. And I want to first focus on youth leadership. Can you share a little bit about the Youth Leadership Council?
Yeah, well, we call it the Literato, but Youth Leadership Council is easier for me to say. Leaders, right? So we're building young leaders. That's I want to say 4 years in its making, and our goal is to pull from the region, 5, 6, 7 county region, and pull these older teenagers into the youth council and help them guide Norte, help them create what they need in their community. So just give them the tools and the experience to do that, as well as, some of them, they get first dibs on jobs with Norte in terms of assistant coaches, and they help run our bike valet. So, they're all looking for summer jobs. So that's a nice side function to that.
What age ranges do you typically see getting involved in that?
Typically, it's that mid-teenager, 14, 15, 16, but any teenager up there, 13 to 18.
Wow.
So we actually just this past year graduated our first 2 from the youth council. They're going on to college now and university.
Oh, that's incredible.
Nice.
Nice to see.
So you went to Northern Michigan University where you earned a bachelor's in international and global studies. And at that time, you're at school. What was the end game? What did you want to walk out of school doing?
That's a long story. It's a lot about me, so I don't know if we want to go down that road.
That's okay. This is just as much about you. But when you walked out, what did you want to step right into?
Yeah, I didn't. I originally went to Northern Michigan as an English major. Ended up basically after a semester the following year, spent a year in China through Northern Michigan University. So when I came back, that English major, I actually probably made negative ground towards it. So I worked with a key professor who was my Chinese history professor, and we basically changed my major to international studies with Native American Studies minor, which I actually tied into international studies, which was cool.
Yeah.
And Northern was flexible enough to let me do that. And, you know, my goal to get out of Northern was to get a degree, and then I went back to China to continue
And
studying
you taught
Chinese.
in Asia, is that correct?
Yeah, it's taught in Taiwan for 2.5 years, and
Incredible.
then went to grad school in China. So
And you are or have been a public servant, having served as city commissioner for the city of Traverse City 2013 to 17. You're a writer,
yeah,
New York Times published photographer, and as we talked about, an educator. So how do all these skills kind of combine
come together
to help you succeed in the role that you're in right now?
I think it's a lot of it is like why I always thought about why am I interested in urban planning? You know, I don't have any urban planning degrees. I have a lot of self-knowledge and a lot of time spent at conferences and stuff and a lot of book reading. But I think more importantly is when I was living abroad in China, Australia, and then some travels, that's where I honed my photography skills. And it's also where I honed my cultural geography skills, if you may, which is a lot of urban planning and design, how people interact with each other, how do people interact in social spaces, and just started to realize how important design is. So I like to say locally, you know, a lot of our problems on the streets and in public spaces is, you know, why are we surprised? It's designed for people to go 50 down your neighborhood street. It's 36 feet wide. There's no parking. And you can take the curve going 30 miles an hour. So, yeah, of course they're going 55 down your neighborhood street. It's designed that way, right?
Interesting.
So, I mean, that might be a little bit of hyperbole there, but you get my point. But when you travel and when you're training yourself to see the world differently, you start to notice, like, how different places do things uniquely to value different things, right? So if you're valuing people in that public space of coming together and getting people out active and socializing, you know, we can all close our eyes and see those pictures of plazas in Italy and stuff, right? That was designed that way. And they, you know, they've lost some of it with the introduction of cars in the 1950s, but they've also fought
cars
to get it back. So, you know, we also had those types of spots, and we just... you know, we tore them down, and that gets into a whole complication of complicated things. But
think of our neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, just completed the sidewalk
Traverse
project.
Heights, yeah, Traverse Heights neighborhood is a great example. I mean, it was one of my final votes is to move forward on bonding for up to $4 million to put sidewalks in Traverse Heights, mainly Traverse Heights, some other places too, because there were just no sidewalks here. There was just an incomplete network of sidewalks. So here, we actually, in Traverse Heights Elementary School, there's actually a lot of kids who do walk because that's what they need to do to get to school. And so it was kind of mind-boggling that there wasn't sidewalks to that point.
Yeah, for an example, these sidewalks weren't here for my kids when they were learning to ride a bike or when they were going to the elementary school that we lived too close for them to get a bus.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not riding the bus, but there wasn't a sidewalk. In wintertime, you know, that's dangerous. You know, anytime that's dangerous, but especially winter. So
Norte just in the last about 5 years ago started working with the city of Traverse City as well as TCAPS, 10 schools in Traverse City for a federal grant, Safe Routes to School grant, which is another $1.2 million towards completing sidewalks around schools and trails and paths and bike lanes. And that's happening right now. So, you know, by the end of this year, I think we'll be up to about 9 miles of new sidewalk with another 3 to come next year, I believe, if I have my math right.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, which is huge. And, you know, at the pace we were going, we, meaning the city, I do say we a lot as a former city commissioner because you're just so used to it, but we as a city, and it really is proper to say that because it takes a lot of citizen support to come out and make those big investments. However, 12 years ago, we were looking at the sidewalk plan, and there was a plan to fill the gaps. It was a 107-year plan, like at the rate we were doing it, and it was like that makes no. And I'm gonna stop there because I already just said it takes time at the city, but that 107 years to complete the sidewalk, that's not a plan to success. That's just you not doing anything. So that's how we got to let's jumpstart and kickstart the sidewalk gap with bonding and the Safe Routes to School grant and whatever else we can do to make sure sidewalks are going in.
Well, what they did to start, I think, was tremendous in that they started these bike trains.
Yep.
And they just tried to encourage neighborhood kids.
Totally, yeah. Make it safe, right? If you can, that critical mass theory, right? If you got enough kids and enough adults with them, they're going to be safe. They're going to feel safe. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And it got a groundswelling and people were on board, and obviously parents were supporting this. And so you've mentioned the sidewalk projects. You've done things like putting portable bike racks at neighborhood bus stops. Are there any other small projects like that you're focused on aside from the big things like the sidewalks?
All the time. We're open to anything.
Yeah.
We just wrote about, not quite transportation related, but we wrote about, he's a teacher at Elk Rapids Lakeland Elementary. His name's Kip Knight, 5th grade teacher. And his idea was he just wanted to get kids more active, and he liked what Norte was doing. So he reached out to us. He's like, and this was during the pandemic, so it's like we weren't going into schools anymore. He's like, can I just borrow some bikes? So he borrowed some bikes from us, set up a motor course on this like empty land around the track area. And the homeroom teachers will book time to go out with the kids during the day, or the kids will use it during the recess, or they'll just swing by if they live nearby. He also did that same theory with cross-country skiing at the school. So
really?
he like groomed a trail for kids to go out cross-country skiing in the wintertime just to keep them active, keep their brains moving, da-da-da-da. And he was telling stories just of like, these kids that go out biking during the school day, now they want to bike with their families. So they're talking to their families about it. And
right.
Families are starting to be like, well, how can we bike more? And so they're getting involved in programs, or just, going out and getting bikes if they can. Yeah.
Going back to happy, healthy, strong communities, and you said it before, and you have advocates now trying to get kids outside, but you've got competition from like every movie on the internet, phones, video games, and you're looking at, cutting down on the aggressive car lines, eliminating pollution. When you look at what you're doing, how do you judge your success?
Yeah, and that's going forward, to be honest, is what we need to get better at. Right now, we're looking at the raw numbers, just like in the growth.
Right.
And we can see that there's a definite demand and desire for families and kids to get out, stay active, but they need to be invited, and they need to feel safe and feel like they can participate as well. So that's why it's very important for us to have like community slow rolls every Wednesday night during the summer where we're going slow. You're in a big group. It's totally safe. There's no race happening here. We will go as slow as the slowest denominator, very accessible to that, But if you get more active and you start to be, you want to go a little faster, we have some of those avenues as well. Yeah. And I think that's highly critical. I think I lost the strain of your initial question, but
just measuring success. Car line shorter this year,
totally.
Or
yeah, we're not out there counting cars at this point,
right.
But we definitely do. Every year we participate in the Walk to School Day, where we ask folks to register with us if they're walking to school that day, do a little competition with it. But it's like those numbers, we want to see those go up, and we're measuring that year to year. We also do a travel tally for kids every year in terms of how you're getting to school, how far away do you live from school, are you walking, biking, do you park and ride? Because that's another option too. Rural areas don't have to go from 0 to 100 in terms of walking and biking to school every day. Yeah. Like, do it when you can, and let's just work in some activity, physical activity, to start the day or to end the day. I used to take a kid to school, and what I would do was just park 3 blocks away. Just walk them in. That's just that extra little activity. Yeah. Really not that much more time on my part, and I don't have to wait in a car line. I can just avoid the whole car line deal and have an enjoyable walk instead.
Norte, what I really like is you talk about biking being a sign of independence. And I certainly remember the halcyon days in the summer of I get up, I'd be on my bike, and I'd be home before dark for dinner. And
Kid dark,
but it felt like a long time.
Yeah.
With nobody checking up on me. Are we in a community that fosters that, like kids can just be on their bikes all day, or is it more guarded than the 1980s?
I think it's definitely more guarded, partly just because maybe the vehicles are larger and faster. I'm not really sure. Yeah. There's probably a lot of reasons why it has changed a little bit. Does seem to be a little bit less freedom. Some of that might be a good thing. I don't think our generation, looking at, the Gen X generation,
we probably weren't very safe.
we weren't really known for having, what was the term? Latchkey. Right?
Yeah.
We were just a bunch of latchkey kids. So there's a lot of freedom when you're, left to your own.
There's a lot of goofy things that we did that we're lucky kids didn't die.
Exactly.
Just,
And, so I don't want to like look nostalgic on my childhood or anything in terms of that. Although, I've written about it, and it taught me independence. Wouldn't have been great if I could be taught that independence while being in a safe environment.
And knowing it's safe.
And knowing it's safe, and knowing my parents like aren't worried, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that they trust that there's education that's happening along with that independence and freedom.
I'm sorry, this podcast is not trying to infer that our parents didn't care about us, but,
I'm totally saying that.
looking at Norte, I know your missions.
I would have loved a Norte program, put it that way.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been awesome. Like, hey, we're dropping you off at this camp. You're going to go biking all day.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
It's more social. I remember just being alone on my bike a lot, going to the comic book store, but this is creating friendships that could last a lifetime. But Norte, I know you focus on accessibility and safety. Safety is a big thing. You've talked about it before. And anyone biking and walking in our community has to worry about that. As a continually growing tourist town with more and more people from the outside, maybe not paying the best attention all the time, are there ways you try to educate that populace as well? Because I've seen some fairly ignorant drivers out there with plates.
To be honest,
Michigan.
it's not. I think the education for me, the best education for me happens with just modeling best behavior as well as being out there. I mean, I talk a lot about traffic calming when we talk about how we redesign a street, but really the best traffic calming is people. Like, if you get a street that's full of people doing things, car's going to slow down. Or when we drive, we're going to slow down. Great example of that. I was recently in Bear Lake for the Bear Lake Festival. And I don't know, Bear Lake, it's basically, what is it? M22 just runs through it, right? People were like everywhere. And part of the street where you usually just fly through going 50 miles an hour through Bear Lake, now they're going 15. Yep. And that wasn't because of any traffic calming that happened. It was because there was people everywhere. And, my main point is if visitors are coming here and they're seeing like, oh, this is the culture of this place is to be out, to be active on your bike, walking, going to the parks, going downtown, and like filling the streets with love and vibrancy.
I've read,
I think they will drive slower.
There are concerns about people who are on their phones looking at directions and they're just not paying attention. And to know ahead of time that this is a very bike and walk focused community, please take some extra care.
And I think nobody's looking at their phone if they're engaged with the street, right? Well, they're not. I mean, you literally can't. And that's kind of what we want to create here is the expectation of, hey, you might be driving through, but look how much fun's going on the sidewalks and the crosswalks, on the trails. And people are out here active. That's what kind of town it is. And that awareness is an education that just happens culturally and socially.
You mentioned TCAPs. Right now, who are your most critical strategic partners? And if you had anyone to pick, like a big fish to land as a strategic partner, who would it be?
The thing about having it with school partners, I mean, some are, like TCAPs is so big. We're always having to re-engage with them, right? I mean, in my time at Norte, I think there's been 3 superintendents. So, you kind of, you're kind of always having to re-engage. So, but having them on board and having the individual principals at different schools on board is so key. It's just been a blessing for Norte to work with. We're starting to engage in what we have been for the last 2-3 years with Kalkaska, but we're trying to, deepen that relationship. And, the schools are great. The village is great. But eventually we're going to have to address the highway that runs through downtown, and that you have these great parks and the library and the village center on one side of the street. You got the downtown business on the other, and then behind them you have the schools and the neighborhood, and they don't feel safe crossing their downtown street, their front street. And that has to be addressed. And I would love to have Michigan Department of Transportation more empathetic to that need of that community.
Yeah. Norte, which is interesting, I think you also offer consulting services, correct?
Yeah.
And can you speak to where your strengths lie there and what kind of clients engage you for this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's something we started because we just kept getting asked. Like, hey, can you help us? And, a key there is there's other communities that look at Norte and love the model. Like, wow, that's great what you're doing. You're getting kids out and look, you can see the change in the community. Yeah. So it can be as simple as just a quick 1 day, 1 hour, 2 hour Zoom, like, hey, here's how you set it up. Here's some tools you need to get a bike camp running, for instance. Or, oh, you want to do a slow roll? It's pretty easy. Here, let's help you up.
Can you elaborate on what a slow roll is? And a lot of people, I think, because, there's a big one that started in Detroit a while back. Yeah. So can you kind of explain to the listeners?
We're all working off of that, big slow roll in Detroit. So basically is to call folks together who want to ride bikes together, but do so slowly, 3, 5, 6, maybe 10 miles per hour, and just go through town. A slow roll is basically, this might be one way to put it. I haven't really heard it put this way, but a non-offensive critical mass. And critical mass is where like bike couriers, and real aggressive types in big cities taking over the streets very hostily.
But it's nearly a parade or...
Yeah, but a slow roll is just, hey, we're neighbors who want to go for a bike ride, and, we're going to do so in big groups, and we're going to go slow, we're going to go not that far, and we're going to have drinks afterwards, get some ice cream afterwards, and
you're not on all the main streets plugging up.
Yeah, we're not
traffic,
plugging up the main arteries. It's
no,
neighborhood streets, and Detroit. I love their slow roll because having biked around, I got a tour around Detroit by bike. There's just so much open space.
Yeah.
This guy Chris comes to our slow roll. He's got big old horns on his bike, but we don't have anyone with riding low riders or anything like that. Like you see in Detroit, there's great bikes down there, But
it's a community. It's people who...
Yeah, come express yourself. That's really what it gets down to.
That is, I think, an accurate way of putting it. It is expression. You're talking about, this is what our town is for. This is why we enjoy it. And I really love that. I love the fact that we have one. Is there anything else that you'd want to share with our listeners about what you have coming up, what's going on in general, anything that we haven't covered with Norte?
Sure. I would like to say about the slow rolls, though, in these community rides. I mean, we do them in Traverse City, and also Elk Rapids has one, and both communities have fully embraced them. And when we have really large ones that we know about, like, hey, it looks like we're going to have a couple hundred people. Right. Traverse City Police Department has been more than generous to help us out.
So those are the kind of challenges you can encounter with that. It's maybe too big and it gets...
it just becomes a comfort level. But and you want to reach out and you want to be a good part of the community, right? Yeah. So it's like, hey... Chief O'Brien, it looks like we're going to have more than usual on Wednesday night. I don't know if you want to block certain intersections for us. That'd be great.
Well, then you just register like a parade or
well, you don't even have, they've been great in terms of not making us register because it's not a parade. It's like it's just a large group of people who've organically come to ride, And
and we're fortunate to have a police chief who's big on community policing and
that's
being part of the community.
And recognizing that we want to have that community spirit. And so... Norte's great. Norte's proud to be a part of that.
That's excellent. Anything else that's coming up?
But we also have after school bike club. It's called Adventure Bike Club. There's 15 schools that we work with, and we basically meet the kids after school at the schools and go for rides from the schools. And so, from Westwoods out in Long Lake to downtown schools. Right. Even Pathfinder's in on that one. They're a little more challenging because of the M22, but we make it work. And then we also have mountain bike season, and that's Northern Michigan Regional Youth Mountain Bike Team. And we have teams out in Palmer Woods, which is out in Leelanau County, Benzie, trying to a new one opening up in Crystal Mountain, all the way up to Nubbs Knob.
Wow.
And then Kalkaska and Elk Rapids, and of course Traverse City. So that's a huge reach in terms of what we like to say the largest youth mountain bike team in Michigan, and partly because we're not as competitive, so it's like first graders to 12th graders. We'll meet them where they are, and get them riding. That's the key. Get them riding.
And you do have a program where kids can get a bike, and once they grow out of it, they can trade that in for a bike that fits them. Maybe the next time they need it.
Yep, the Regional Kids Library, and that's for bikes that they can take home and ride with their family and things of that nature. We also have program bikes, which is key as part of that library. So if a child is in one of our programs, whether it be mountain biking or adventure bike club or summer bike camp, and they don't have a performance bike, a bike with gears and something they can be comfortable on going a little bit longer miles, they can check those out for the length of the program. That's extraordinary. Yeah, and thanks for a lot of donations for that to actually come to be. We've bought a few of those bikes, but most of them have been donated. McLean's Cycle and Fitness has been one of our largest donors of used bikes, but also other bike shops.
And on that note, how can listeners support Norte? How can they donate?
Well, donating is pretty easy. Just go to our website, elgruponorte.org. I'm sure maybe this podcast has a link on it. But also, if you have a used bike and you want to donate it. But we're pretty easy to find, too.
It's
You can
unique.
just Google Norte Traverse City and we're
Traverse
popping
City.
up. Or even, youth bike programs.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This was really, really amazing. It was so much fun learning more about what you do. And can't thank you enough for your pursuits and for all those who pursue along with you, ensuring a safe and thriving biking and walking community, empowering our youth to get outside and to be strong leaders. And to our listeners, thank you all for listening and for pursuing the positive.
Hey, thanks again for joining us on the Pursuit of podcast, the Pursuit of Norte. Want to thank Gary Howe for coming in. To get involved with Norte, you can Google Norte, N-O-R-T-E, or go to elgruponorte.org, elgruponorte.org. Also want to give a shout out to our supporters, the Tin Lid Hat Company, tinlidco.com. Use promo code The Pursuit Of for 40% off to our listeners. And for general podcasting, audio, visual production inquiries, look us up at newleonard.com.